I'll go ahead and start. People can continue to join as we get going here. But hello, everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time to join the 2025 NINDS Clinical Trials Methodology course informational webinar. We're grateful for your time and interest in our program. My name is Megan Mordius. I'm the program manager for the CTMC, and I'm based at the University of Virginia. I'll just make a couple of quick housekeeping announcements before we get started. Firstly, please note that this session is being recorded and the recording will be posted to our website after the meeting today. If everyone could just please double check that their microphone is muted and stays muted when they're not actively participating, that would be great. Today, we'll start with a brief presentation from Drs. Mark Quigg and Lori Gutman, who are the current PIs of the CTMC program. We're also joined today by Dr. Robin Conwit, who is a member of our executive committee and has been involved with the CTMC for many years. There's going to be two ways for you to ask questions on today's meeting. So firstly, you can type questions into the chat anytime, and we will answer those at the conclusion of the presentation. Also, once we get into that Q&A portion, you're welcome to raise your hand using the reactions tool, and we'll call on you and you can ask your question aloud if you prefer to do it that way. The Q&A is going to be the most important part of today's call, so we really encourage you to ask questions and look forward to a great discussion. The last thing I'll mention is that we do have a post-webinar survey that will pop up in your browser at the conclusion of the meeting, and we hope that you will take a couple of minutes to complete this survey. That will help us understand our audience better and help us best serve you this year and in future years. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Quigg. If you're having any issues with any technical issues with the meeting, please message me in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. So I'm Mark Quigg, co-PI with Lori Gutman. Robin Conwit is a member of our executive committee and notably the inventor of the concept of the clinical trials methodology course. And just a little background of this course. This was started in 2013. The PIs of that endeavor who continue on as part of our executive committee were based at University of Michigan and at University of Iowa. This is a renewal, a reapplication of the clinical trials methodology course. So it's been around for more than a decade. And the results of the CTMC, I think, are impressive. Over the years, about 40% of trainees who go through the course eventually have NIH funding from one institution or another. So that's well above the pay line for the NIH. And there is marked success in foundation and local grants as well. So it is an organization that has had success, and I really hope that you consider applying to it. Next, please. So the purpose of the clinical trials methodology course is to not only develop protocols, but to develop you, to help sustain and develop clinical researchers in the neurosciences. And what I mean by neurosciences is not only neurology, but we welcome applicants from neurosurgery, neuropsychology, etc. Our main activity is to help you create competitive protocols and grant applications across a range of significant funders. I mentioned the NIH, a foundation, and local sources. And what's happening behind the curtain, of course, is that basically you're making friends. We are building networks of mentors, mentees, colleagues across the various levels of experience in different locations. And I can tell you that I keep up with many of the trainees who I've had contact with over the years. So you truly form a network as part of this course. Next, please. There are two basic tracks to this course. The traditional and most frequently populated track is what we call the foundation track. And typically these are early or early mid-career investigators who are forming their first prospective interventional clinical trial. These are typically single center and early phase 1, phase 2 style trials. We have a new track that we're emphasizing this year and the subsequent years as well, which we're calling the advanced track. And this is any career stage that is proposing their first network-based trial. And what we're trying to do is to supply robust and interesting proposals to the three NINDS research networks listed here: Siren, StrokeNet, and NeuroNext. Next, please. So what kind of clinical trials are appropriate? Well, they have to be neuroscience centered. So I said earlier that it's truly broadly neuroscience. So we've seen proposals and want to see proposals from the different fields of neurology, as well as neuropsychology, neurosurgery, and appropriate applications from psychiatry. These are early to mid-phase clinical trials, typically not multi-center, that are delivering an intervention. And that is an important aspect of what we do best. We also will work on biomarker development trials that are designed within the framework of a clinical trial. The kind of research applications that are not suited for this course are definitive trials. So most of the networks, as you know, are working on mid-phase trials. So we're concentrating on that particular phase of trial development. Observational or uncontrolled studies should not be the focus of this particular application. We have, as part of grant development, turned prospective trials into an observational trial, but that is a conclusion and not a starting off point. And of course, we are doing human clinical research, and pre-phase or phase 1 animal model trials are not suitable for this particular application. Next, please.
I want to expand on this just a second.
Sure.
So we do have the neuroscience centered. I mean, that's really important to think about. You don't have to be in the categories that Mark listed off. We've had people in the past who were trauma surgeons, radiologists, rehab docs, the list, emergency medicine, the list goes on and on. So it's really more just neuroscience focused trials. So community, and I'm seeing some questions, so we'll answer those at the end. I'll let you keep going.
No, that's an important point. The content of the trial that is the most important, not the origin of the investigator.
Right.
So trainee eligibility, that's a good segue into this slide. So very importantly, you must be the PI of this proposed project. This is not suitable for example, your mentor to be the PI and you are serving as a sub-investigator in this fixed trial. It's because often we need the flexibility to change, to mold, to edit. And a person who's not in the course, your mentor, well, we have little ability to affect that particular kind of relationship. Typically, the applicant is a faculty member. Fellows are eligible, but again, they must be PI of the proposed project, and they have to be able to, within the application, to state that they can navigate this project through its initiation and completion within the scope of a fellowship. As I mentioned before, this is a neuroscience adjacent range of proposals. Oops, coughing fit. I have a cold. Furthermore, this proposal is to be performed at your current institution, or if you're planning to move, to have the machinery and the mentor and the capabilities to carry this trial out in your new place of employment. Very practically, you have to be able to meet the course's time requirements. We have weekly meetings, one that needs to be able to prepare for those. We have a mandatory appearance at a residential meeting that this year will be in Charlottesville, Virginia, in the last week of June. So those are the basics of trainee eligibility. Next, please. So the details of the application. This is coming up. It's roughly 4 weeks to be due in January 21st. And it's submitted via our website. Now, the application is not onerous. We basically just want to see a pithy summary of what you are proposing to do. So we need a description of the scientific area, what question you're going to answer, and its rationale behind it. And that's basically 1 page. We need a summary of the research question, and all this is templated. We need some idea of potential funding sources, whether that's local, etc. Who is going to be working with you? We'll need NIH biosketches for the applicant and your mentor. And very importantly, a department chair's letter that can be up to 2 pages. This department chair's letter has a couple things that we're really looking for. And one is basically a pledge to support the commitment of time to enable you to successfully undertake this course. So can he assure you and us that you have the protected time to do this? And there's some other materials. If you are working on a novel compound, that there's some evidence of its availability, some sort of contact with the company and etc. Or if there's a device being developed, that we have some sort of evidence that this is being worked out.
And as Mark said, it's really not a long application, but it's real important to be as clear as possible. The template will tell you what to put in there, but clarity helps the committee decide who to choose for the course, since there are a limited number of people who can attend each year. So that's all I wanted to add.
No, thank you. Next, please. So what we do for the spring of 2025 is that the course content is geared towards developing a scientifically rigorous, feasible, and ethical clinical trial protocol. And the protocol is not the grant itself. It is the kind of summary of what's going to happen. The primary course deliverable is the protocol synopsis, basically the summary of what's going to happen. This is going to be suitable for submission to networks to be used directly in grants that you are going to write. As part of this process, you'll basically have your boilerplate that you can cut and paste into the proper application. This is not a grant writing course per se. It is a protocol development course. We really get into the practicalities and robustness of design. However, everyone here has written grants and has a big opinion on style and salesmanship and the ways to convince people on your pitch. So in the second half of the course, there will be some emphasis on the presentation specific aims part of these grant presentations, an important component. Next, please. So here's the timeline of the course. Basically, we are occupying 3/4 of the year. We are taking the applications in the end of the 3rd week in January. We are evaluating in the executive committee. We are ranking these and then offering the highest rank acceptance. We send these out in February. We begin our small group meetings. So we use Zoom. We're all over the country. So you will be assigned a small group that you will meet with weekly for an hour's budgeted time. But I can tell you sometimes these things spill over. There's preparation time required for these group meetings. So it's not just an hour. It's the stuff leading up to the hour and then the hour. So we all meet together on a weekly basis. We become a little family, and this family consists of 3 trainees and 3 faculty members. So there's a one-to-one correspondence. We have a senior or group leader. We've got another clinician investigator. And then very importantly, there's a biostatistician who's going to be critical in both evaluating the rigor of the question and providing you basically with statistical consultation. The climax of the whole deal is the residential meeting. We will be alternating between Charlottesville, Virginia and Indianapolis, Indiana. This residential meeting is 4 days. So the big long days are the Tuesday, the Wednesday, and a half day Thursday. Travel to our small burg is always something that needs to be thought of. So you can't be arriving on the Tuesday. You have to be arriving on the Wednesday, on the Monday. And most importantly, in your planning, in-person attendance for the entire residential course is mandatory. So we can't have folks skipping out early or coming in late. We have follow-up Zoom-based small group meetings in which the lessons learned from the residential meeting are then honed into a deliverable protocol synopsis. And we have up to 3 webinars and 3 small group meetings to get those details out. Oops, another coughing fit, sorry. And then finally, the executive committee forms an NIH mock study section in which we will review your protocol synopsis, and this is optional, but it is a very useful exercise because you will be listening to the reviewers review your protocol. And that is often quite enlightening, if not a little bit humbling. But the process is to really hear how your presentation has come across. So I believe that's my last slide. And we have questions now. And Lori, why don't you go ahead and, or Robin, why don't you go ahead?
I'm happy to answer the questions. I'm happy to answer the questions, but Will has been answering them madly in the chat while you were talking. So I just have to say thanks to Will for being the answerer extraordinaire.
Did I answer them right enough?
Yeah, they were close enough. Yeah, you did fine.
By the way, introducing Will Muir is University of Michigan, and he is part of the executive committee. So he's you haven't been getting answered by a stranger.
I think for the recording, it would be helpful just to touch on the questions in the chat briefly.
Yeah, I was just going to read through them. So one of the questions was, what defines who is a mentor? And Will answered that quite appropriately, as he did all the other questions. It's really the person who is your mentor for this particular project, right? Who's going to be going to be sponsoring you sort of through this project. It's usually someone within your institution. It may not be like your career mentor or even your only research mentor, but it is the one for this particular protocol and project, because they're the one that is you'll be going back to with questions during our sessions, during your small group sessions. Sometimes people will, you'll be challenged by your faculty, and it's as Mark said, there are 2 clinical trialists and a statistician for each group, and so there's 3 faculty and 3 students, usually students being you guys in the group, and sometimes we will call in other members of the faculty if there's something that's more in their expertise, and they may challenge what you're doing. You need to be able to go back to your mentor and say, so this is what they're challenging me on. What do you think about this? How do we, is this, are they missing a concept? Am I not explaining it well enough? Just so that you can then move it forward. So that's the kind of person you want to have as your mentor. And you can have more than one, obviously, depending on your study. If it's a study that's non-pharmacologic intervention, and you have somebody who's more of the behavioral expert and somebody else who's more the clinical trial expert. So, but you just need to be having somebody also within the department that is going to protect your interests so that you can accomplish the study. We need to know that there's support there. That's also the reason for the letter from the chair, that he or she can write you a letter saying they will, that they support your time in the course itself, including the mandatory in-person meeting. So that's the answer to that was a longer answer to the first question. And then another question about, do we work with investigators who are proposing behavioral, non-drug interventions or community-based interventions? And the answer to that is yes, and it depends. So it just depends on the stage of the research. So kind of developmental stuff is not really what we're looking at, but if you have a defined intervention, be it community, behavioral, other types of interventions, it just needs to be a clinical trial that that the answer is going to give you some type of that a clinical trial for using methods that using an intervention that is sort of a quantitative question with the intervention. I hope that is answering your, oh no, I see 9 new messages. Okay.
Lori, do you want me to add something about the?
Yeah, go ahead. You add that one.
I mean, one example is if you're doing like a feasibility trial of like maybe distributing blood pressure cuffs in the community, you might have some outcome that is, how many people return blood pressures to you, knowing that, you want to make an intervention someday that reduces their blood pressure, but in your first feasibility stage, you just want to make sure people even measure it and send it back. So that would be an example. However, if you were doing a fact-finding mission where you figured out what people wanted to hear about in text messages to encourage them to manage their blood pressure at home in order to reduce their risk of stroke, that would be very sort of in an early developmental phase. It's not that both of those things aren't important. It is that something that has a more quantitative aim is a better fit for the course and a better sort of setting within a clinical trial. That's not to say you might not gather some qualitative data in a clinical trial alongside having a quantitative main aim. But if your aim is more to develop a multifaceted intervention, that may not be a good fit for the course. But if it is to test the feasibility of a well-defined multifaceted intervention, that could be a good fit for the course.
Thank
So,
you.
I also wanted to again say just about the course itself, really, this is to develop a real protocol that you are really gonna move forward. It's not just like a practice course where you, I mean, this is gonna be like the next step is something real life that you're gonna move forward. Robin, I don't know if you wanna address the next series of questions since you answered them all in the chat?
Well, I didn't answer them all, but go ahead, Lori, just continue and I'll.
I'm gonna let you answer the one, so, someone asked, that if they're from Nigeria, can you participate in the program? And if we facilitate connection to mentors in the US, you wanna go ahead with that question, Rob?
Sure. So, because the NIH grant is the source of the income, travel is only repaid to applicants within the US. So even if you're in Canada, you have to get to Buffalo or Detroit or some point, Seattle, some point within the US. And then we can fly you from that point to Charlottesville. And the question about potential mentors, we're all happy to link you to potential mentors within your area of expertise and interest, but it's really helpful to have someone local for your best success. And if you're applying for a K award through NIH, you really need a local mentor to be successful. And Lori's on the K scientific review, so she might want to chime in.
Yeah, so we have wide networks of contacts, but establishing your primary mentor is something that we probably want you to come into the application with.
Yeah, I mean, one of the important outcomes for our course is for our folks to be successful in getting funding, right? That's how we keep getting the course refunded, is by showing that there's value in this to the scientific community. So, so we, again, just to reiterate, it's important that you're you're thinking about this as your project that you're going to move forward. Will, you want to say something before I go on?
I guess I just wanted to make a question. I guess I had a comment about the K thing, unless, did you want, or were you in mid thought, or could I make a comment about the K question?
I can answer it, but you can go first.
Yeah, so I think many people at this stage who are taking this course are interested in developing Ks. I will say at NINDS, it is very hard to do a K23 on a NINDS K23 budget. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other good questions you could be asking within your early phase clinical trial, but generally, according to the guidance through the program announcements and the specific information that you can find at NINDS, if you are wanting to try to do a clinical trial through a K mechanism, generally the study needs to have some degree of mechanistic aims, because in order to test efficacy, it is very rare that you can create a study design that can do that well within a K budget. It's not to say it's impossible, but it's generally hard, at least at NINDS, to come up with a clinical trial design that can be feasibly done. Again, some can be, but most would be challenging, and that some prospective cohort or natural history study may be a better fit for the K. So just because you have a good K idea and it's not a good fit for the course doesn't mean it's not a good idea. But the course is designed to set up a trial of an intervention where you are learning about how something you're doing to people is potentially improving their health.
Yeah, I think probably the more appropriate way to think about it, well, I shouldn't say more appropriate, another way to think about it is that some people will put applying to this course towards the end of their K, once they've gotten all their data, and then and they're getting ready for the next step. So they're developing the protocol for the next step, because as Will says, it's hard to fund a clinical trial out of a K award, just because of the cost, and clinical trials cost way more than basic science trials. So that's another way to think about the K question. And your question about is the ideal candidate using the protocol to apply for a K award. The other thing is that, you know, there's a second part of this course that is a little newer, and it's for people who may be designing a trial that would go into a larger network. So like NeuroNext or StrokeNet or Siren or you know, one of the other neuroscience networks. So and when you apply for the course, you'll see that you can distinguish yourself as to which route you think you're going to take. Now, it may be that if you get into the course and you think you're going to be putting together something that's going to go to the network, it may be that you get forced to take a step back and do another study first to get you prepared for the network. But one of the goals would be that then when you apply to the network, there would be less of a time lag to getting it up and running because you've already had it worked through this course. So there's a question about, is there a fee to attend? The answer is no. It's funded by by the grant itself. The fee that you have to pay is your time, and that's the only fee. How detailed does a team member list need to be for the application? Really, we need primarily you, who you think you might need. It doesn't have to, it can even be to be determined, but your mentor, or mentors. That's really the most important team list. I mean, it helps us understand how well you understand what you're going to need for your team to be successful. And yes, lots of things change as the protocol is developed. The question is, would this be expected to change as the protocol is developed? At the end of every course, we have people stand up and say what happened during the course. And I remember at least one person every year says, well, I came in with this idea and I'm leaving with a completely different idea. Or I came in with this study and I left with a very different study, but I have a better understanding of why I had to change it and how it's going to be successful. And then that goes to the question about placebo-controlled. The study design is really based on what you think how you think it needs to be designed. And that actually changes a lot sometimes during the course, maybe several times as you move along during the whole course of the course. So propose the study design that you think is going to be successful, be it placebo-controlled or otherwise. Is it okay if the clinical trial proposal tests an intervention in more than one hospital, given the need for it? Yes. You just have to, we have had people who have multi-center trials. There's a little, again, that goes to, if you really need a large multi-center trial, you're probably going to be applying to one of the networks with that. If you need a couple of hospitals we've had people do studies where, you're comparing two different cohorts, or you have one arm in one site and one arm in the other site. There's lots of different things. So there's no restriction.
We've had quality intervention style trials that compare time to quickest status epilepticus intervention, and the intervention was a teaching program. So, and that was done on the multi-center basis. So yes, there is precedence for that. Go ahead, Lori. I was just adding something in.
No, I ran out of questions. Oh wait, here's another one.
Okay.
You're interested in testing a community-based intervention to optimize blood pressure control in high-risk stroke patients with vascular cognitive impairment. If it's an intervention and it's a clinical population, it's appropriate to propose for this course. Is that a fair statement, Will and Mark and Robin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the outcome and intent could matter, right? Like it in this case, this would be a righteous version and eligible for the course because you're looking to slow cognitive impairment. If you were looking to slow impairment in renal function, it may not be a good fit for the course. It may be a good thing for the patient, and it may be a side effect, so to speak, of reducing cognitive impairment. But that being said, we would anticipate that in many of those studies, it could be hard to show a study that moves the needle on say MoCA or something like that, just given the number of patients you might need. So if you were using blood pressure as that sort of surrogate that was well established as slowing cognitive decline based on other information that you know of, then that would be yeah. I think on that sample size might be high thing that Robin points out. Well, that is also another question for the comment and question from Dr. Payaxo above. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. If you feel like you need a lot of hospitals to assess safety, I think that's interesting. It'd be nice to know a little bit. I mean, like if we have time, I mean, it'd be nice to know a little bit more about why you're hoping to have that, because generally in a lot of neurologic studies, the safety events are far rarer than the outcome events that we're looking at. So having good resolution on safety events can be challenging within smaller sample sizes. So we often encourage people to think about it from a boundary type perspective, like how unsafe would this intervention have to be for in my feasible number of patients for us to walk away from it or modify it. Because people will tell you that the first thing you have to do in an early phase clinical trial is show that something is safe. But if you're if you want to try to show a new thrombolytic for stroke doesn't have a ridiculously high hemorrhage rate in 10 patients, you're going to have pretty limited resolution in such a trial because of the event rate being pretty low relative to your number of patients.
Well, we are the question chat scroll has slowed.
Feel free to speak up if you have other questions or continue to put them in the chat. We still have some time. Also, our email addresses are up there. If you send your questions to Megan, they actually also go to Mark and I too, or Megan is good at triaging all of the questions to the right people. And also please go to the website to look for more information as well. How many typically apply and how many do you select? Okay. I think usually we get between 50 to 60 applicants. Is that right, Will? Am I close to that? 50 to 60 applicants?
I think in the newer version, we may be around more like 30 to 40 with respect to our 15 spots.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have 15 spots. So
And I think the one thing that I would say, even though that number maybe sounds daunting, a lot of times when we get applications, a lot of the ones that we aren't able to accept, they may have really good ideas. They just aren't things that are really good trial ideas. So a really good project scientifically may not be a good fit for this course. So that's, so in the event we aren't able to accommodate your project, don't feel that is a scientific indictment of it.
And we have had reapplications as well. So that is something that does happen. And often those second applications are improved in some way.
And sometimes take priority, especially if there's a specific reason for the change. So the question of this person has an interest in developing a pre-hospital interventional trial. Would that be appropriate for this course? And the answer is yes. I mean, the key thing is it has to be neuroscience based, has to be interventional clinical trial. Those are the key things.
And I will say though that sometimes that means it can be, you know, you need to be prospectively doing some form of an intervention, but you don't necessarily need to have a placebo. You don't necessarily need to have a control group in certain cases if you have a good natural history estimate of rates, but you need to be introducing some form of an intervention prospectively. Yeah.
So prior successful sample submissions that can be reviewed was the next question. And I believe there's a sample of how to answer the questions on the website. Is that right, Megan?
Within the application instructions, there is, Dr. Moyer provided an example of how in the second portion, the summary questions, Dr. Moyer provides an example of how those could be answered. However, at this point, we don't have any examples of prior applications posted.
And I will say, if you think you have a good idea, you should apply. We have so many, the variability of questions and trial design that comes out of this over the last 15 years, 15? Oh, I lost track of how many years, has been 12. I don't know, somewhere between, we've been doing this for 12 to 15 years.
10.
10, okay. Oh, but there was COVID. So, but it's always fascinating to me to see the variety of disorders, outcome measures, approaches to problems, you know, the different interventions that can be done. So if you have a question that you would like to answer in a clinical trial, I would encourage you.
That's right.
Go ahead. And
I want to add that we're not evaluating your grantsmanship. That is not the purpose of the application. Right. We are evaluating the I always thought that, does it have legs, which is a way to say, is this trial potentially robust enough and interesting enough and answering an important question that will help this applicant start a career in clinical investigation and have the potential to form a robust phase 3 definitive trial. That is the kind of stuff that we are looking at. We're not looking at your pristine specific aims writing capability. So whether you've done this before or not is not part of our evaluation. Yeah. So please don't be intimidated by form or template. Please give us your best content, though.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Will, I was just gonna say, you know, the clarity, sometimes clarity and brevity can go together, right? So again, you're not applying to necessarily get funding, you're applying to get into the course to get help in making this, you know, into a protocol that can then be morphed into the grant that's going to get you the funding. I mean, one of the things, only other thing I will say is that sometimes what stops people from getting into the course is that it's a really important question, but there's just not any good way to answer it because you need too many patients, or it's going to take you 100 years to see the change or something like that. Will's laughing. Like all the neuropathy ones, right? Like all my stuff.
Unfortunately, yeah. A disease with a natural history of 70 years to develop perhaps is not going to be in the framework of a 5-year trial.
Yeah, you'll have to build it into a spaceship that's traveling with everybody in hibernation. But I think that the serious point, we don't have examples of people's prior projects because a lot of times these things are on an arc of their development. So we want to be sensitive to not just like blasting their IP out into the world. But the frequently asked questions have a lot of areas where there is things where prior applications have gone onto the rocks. So those are good places to look. And I would emphasize what Dr. Gutman is saying about clarity, but also some degree of, passes a whiff test in terms of seeing that it's a study that could be done someday. Like there's some very important questions that just, unfortunately would require that, if you want to improve, if you really want to do a better, vertebral dissection anticoagulation type study versus aspirin, it's a really important question, but it's pretty well known that it'd be a study that would take hundreds of thousands of patients, and thus is not going to rise to the top of a development pathway. If you had a very specific subset of bad looking occlusions, some biomarker to say like, here, we're going to work to select these patients with really bad looking vertebral arteries who could really benefit from, anticoagulation, then a study like that, might be feasible, but it would be a little hard to get it over the hump from, just the general knowledge that there've been a lot of studies before that haven't been able to show a difference in those treatments.
Okay. Thank you.
I hope that's not anybody's idea, but if it is, it's okay.
Let me point out that Megan has put the link to our facts in the chat, so that can be very helpful for you.
And then please answer our survey. I don't know if you want to go ahead and post that now, Megan, and we would really appreciate it if you would just take the couple minutes that it will take to fill it out.
When I end the meeting, it will pop up.
Okay.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
Tricky.
All right. Everything's automated now, right? Okay, so I really appreciate your attendance. I would entertain questions via email, either relayed through Megan or directly to me. And if I can't answer it, I'll find out someone who can. So I appreciate y'all's attendance, and I guess we can call it a day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mhm.